Hey, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I'm your host Paul, and earlier you saw Max on the gun. So do me a little favor and take this little test. Say you're driving out late at night and you come into a stoplight. Which one of these images is closer to what you see in reality? Number one or number two? Well, if you said number two, congratulations, you just joined Club Astigmatism. So if any of you guys looked through a red dot optic before, this should not be new news to you. But you have a couple options. Number one, you can get some corrective surgery, or number two, you can use a prism scope. And there's a few on the market, but we're looking at one of the strongest ones today, the Primary Arms 1X microprism with the Cyclops Gen 2 reticle. So to see what this unique optic brings to the table, we're going to take a closer look at it right now. So let's go. So out of the box, the first thing you'll notice is its size and weight. Similar to the Primary Arms MD25 we looked at earlier, I'll leave a link if you haven't already seen it. It rides the line between a micro dot and a full-size dot. At 7.6 ounces with the included mount, it's not exactly featherweight, but it's close to an EOTech XPS model, so you likely won't notice it bouncing around when you're on the move. Speaking of mounts, literally half the box contents are your mounts. So like that Chipotle lunch burrito you're having right now, you mix and match your choice of spacer heights in low, medium, or high, and then your preferred amount of cantilever, straight or cantilever. The manual lays out all the options really well, so using that, we went with the cantilever and a medium spacer. At 1.5 inches high, it's the same height as a standard scope mount, and it has the cantilever so we can put it a little closer to our eye. If you have a backup iron sight, you're likely going to want the cantilever as well. One last note about the mount though is that it's not QD, so if you need that, look for a mini ACOG QD mount as they're compatible with this sight. And the reason why you're going to need to think about mounting options is because unlike a red dot, a prism sight has eye relief and an eye box similar to an LPVO. Now, it does have much more forgiving eye relief as this sight has a max of 6 inches compared to a typical LPVO at 4 inches. But PA lists the optimal eye relief at 3.6 inches, so it's really close to how most LPVOs perform at 1X. Therefore, I'd recommend that for the best field of view and eye relief, put it roughly in the same position as your LPVO ocular lens. For us, that's right above the charging handle. Speaking of field of view, so let's take a closer look at the internals. In terms of field of view, this isn't a red dot, but it comes close. At 76.5 feet at 100 yards, it's not as wide as an LPVO 1X, but as long as you stay target focused, you're not going to notice much degradation in your field of view. One note is that some of the external controls are large, so you're not going to see the housing melt away like an EOTech does. And while we're talking field of view, one other mention I'd make is its objective lens size is 17 millimeters. Therefore, I'd make the same recommendation when using those sights. We mount these as close to the eye as possible to see the full travel of the reticle during recoil and to pick up the reticle as fast as possible from different shooting positions. Now, one thing that really helps pick up that reticle is its very good glass quality. It's clear from edge to edge with no sign of the tint or distortion. Even though this is the SLX model with the Chinese glass, I don't think you'll be disappointed with the glass quality. Now, once you power on the sight, let's look at the reticle brightness. At the highest setting, I'd say the reticle is daylight bright in that it offers just enough contrast between the reticle and its surroundings. Even though it's not as bright as the EOTech, I'd say that running at full illumination during the daytime is worth it, and you can use it for both eyes open target focus shooting. So when it comes to this reticle at 1X, it's very similar to the MD25 size-wise in that the donut reticle is sized around 65 MOA. And within it, you'll find Primary Arms trademark center chevron. I think the center chevron is around 4 MOA wide, so it's big enough to just splash on any target center mass and you'll have an effective hit. Now, there's no BDC in this model, so your long range capability is limited to what the chevron can offer. The manual states you can go out to 400 yards with this center chevron. I don't know about this, especially with this chunky reticle, as I prefer a smaller stadia lines or dots, but we have been able to shoot it out to 300 yards, so those published drops are likely close. Unfortunately, SLX doesn't have these drops for the center chevron yet, so you have to experiment and verify. And by the way, those hashes at the bottom are not BDC hashes. If you were to plug those numbers in the SLX, you'd see that they run out to 1,000 yards or so, and no one's shooting a prism out that far. Instead, those hashes are for ranging unknown distance targets, very much like Primary Arms LPVOs. You align your man-sized target's feet with the bottom stadia, and then they'll tell you your rough distance. I haven't tested this myself, as I usually don't need to passively range man-sized targets at unknown distances, but I'm glad this feature is there. Speaking of long range, you can pair this prism with a magnifier like we're doing here with this Vortex 3X Micro. But there are some caveats. First caveat is you need to move the prism forward enough to make room for the magnifier. Consequently, then you'll be outside of the ideal eye relief position, but it's still usable. You'll be losing some field of view, but you'll notice that it's not too bad. The second caveat is that you need to adjust 2 diopters now, one on the prism and one on the magnifier. It takes a little experimentation since all of our eyes are different. Speaking of that diopter, let's back out and talk externals to round out the package. So let's take a closer look at the externals. As far as the adjustment turrets, they're large, and just like the housing, they're recessed into the body so they don't snag on anything and bump them off their settings. The adjustment slot is large enough for a brass casing, although a coin will likely be your best bet. And when you're turning, remember that it's 1 MOA per click. So at 50 yards, it's a ½ inch every time. So if you're zeroing 100 yards, that's 1 inch per click. So it's pretty rough. So you'll want to think about shooting a group that's close enough. On the left side, you'll find the illumination knob that spins between 13 brightness levels and 1 off position, labeled 0. Now on this FDE model, it's a little bit hard to see the numbers since they're in white. There are no off positions in between, and the first 3 brightness settings are night vision only. One note about this knob is it's kind of stiff to turn, so just keep turning it. You'll notice a pressure difference as you change between the numbers. Now, the manual does state that this sight gets a pretty astounding almost 30,000 hours at a medium setting, and it also has its own wake-up technology, so you might as well just leave your illumination running full at all times. And lastly, since this sight is more like a scope than a red dot, you'll want to set the diopter. As mentioned in the LPVO user guide, I'll link to it if you haven't already seen it. I like to pick a target at about 7 yards and turn the diopter until I get to as close as 1x as possible. If you're using a magnifier, what we recommend is we try adjusting the prism diopter first for 1x, then we flip the magnifier in, then adjust the magnifier until the reticle is clear. Once that's done, flip the magnifier out and make sure your 1x is still 1x, and you're good to go. All right, everybody, we're back. So what's the final verdict on this Primary Arms 1X microprism? Well, my guess is that prisms are going to continue gaining in popularity, especially as the shooting demographic starts getting older and our eyes start needing more help. Here on the channel, we generally run LPVO, so we don't have a lot of runtime with prisms, but if you're looking to replace your red dot and you're going to run anything at red dot distances and you have astigmatism, well, I think this sight is a very strong contender, so definitely give this sight a shot. And that's the final verdict. Hope it helps. And if this video did help you, please do me a favor and share, comment, and subscribe. It does help the channel. Thanks for joining us, and I'll see you guys again next time.